Katy Balls, our Sunday Times Washington editor, joins me to chat about the latest from Trump land. What's being said about Iran at the moment, Katy?
So far you have Trump, I think, trying almost to have a balancing act, which isn't always what he tries to do. But he has been, he has effectively been saying, we'll step in if you hurt these protesters, and had some warnings in that sense. But he also, for example, you were just talking about the Shah's son. He said that he wouldn't want to meet with him right now and they need to kind of work out their own thing. So there's not this sense of trying to get behind a new regime just yet. And I think there's more a waiting to see how it all lands while, also, I think, generally being supportive of the uprising. You have Marco Rubio, speaking about the Iranian people, but not wanting to get too entangled just yet.
But I believe Pahlavi actually lives in Maryland, doesn't he, or lives somewhere on the east coast of America. Has there been any contact between him and Trump? Do you know?
I think the suggestion is that he would be keen to meet, and as you say, logistically, this would be very possible. But so far, the White House and Donald Trump have been pouring cool water on the idea that this is something that should happen right now. So I think the appetite is a bit more one way. Now, of course, in the coming days, if the situation continues, if it looks as though things are to go in a direction where new leadership and things that could start to change. But I think it's telling that right now, especially in a week where, or a new year that Trump has been very closely associated with the phrase regime change on things like Venezuela, that they're slightly holding back on this one.
Because it doesn't play to the MAGA crowd, does it really? The isolationism can be forgotten when it's the Western Hemisphere, but not when it's Iran, I think is probably the view, isn't it, from his supporters?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's definitely the focus on the Western Hemisphere and what is near the US as a priority, its own backyard. I suppose there's also a practical point, which is if you decided to kind of, in various ways, run Venezuela, think about capturing Greenland, how much can you really take on all at once?
Well, let's continue with Greenland for a moment then, because that's occasioned a certain frisson of worry over here, if I may say so. And there seems to be a gap between what Trump says, either popularly for public support or whatever, and what Marco Rubio is telling the Europeans.
Yes, and again, that's often a common theme when it comes to this White House, which is I think Marco Rubio is often viewed at least as this the voice of moderation, or he will say things in it. He'll often say a very similar thing to what the rest of the White House and the administration is saying, but he'll just couch it in language which is a bit more acceptable to the European side. Um, I think on Greenland, I mean, in a way, some of this is not new. When Trump returned in the second term, he spoke a lot about Greenland. It's just that no one took him that seriously. They didn't take him literally. So he said he wanted to take Greenland. He sent his son, Donald Trump Jr., who at the time was accompanied by the late Charlie Kirk, to Greenland on an expedition. He sent JD Vance there. So they were really ramping up the rhetoric. But of course, ever since his moves in Venezuela, I think talking about it and having this revived push in the Western Hemisphere makes people think, oh, maybe this isn't all just rhetoric and pantomime. Maybe there really is a plan here. I still think that when you speak to figures in DC, and we know Donald Trump likes to keep people guessing on foreign policy, but figures in the administration, they're not convinced that they are quite skeptical of the idea that Trump is going to go in and invade it. But I think there is a feeling that um, with all this pressure, you could end up in a situation where they get quite a lot of what they want through this. And I think that some in MAGA really enjoy talking about taking Greenland because it clearly winds up the establishment and also many European leaders who they often don't want to please.
And it's in the Western Hemisphere, of course. How many tankers has he nicked so far?
Um, well, we've seen some of that this week in terms of stopping a tanker and so forth. And I think to your point on the Western Hemisphere, obviously the logic, the thing that does connect both Venezuela and Greenland is this sense that they feel as though, um, you know, going around the Western Hemisphere, those countries which are surrounding America, those that are closest, that's how you secure America. And they would argue that yes, people focus on this idea that they're going to invade Greenland, but right now they don't think that it has deep enough security or is developed enough to be a strong place, and that makes it vulnerable to Russia and China. And they don't think that the current situation is working for it. And also, there's the risk of Greenland independence, and then what happens then on things like NATO. So those are I think the argument you'll hear when people are trying to explain what's really going on behind the noise.
Right, and the number of tankers he is unrepentantly boarding tankers right, left, and centre at the moment, isn't he?
Yes.
Any more happened overnight?
I think overnight the main story's been Iran, but we have seen on the tankers looking at that, and then of course we had the tanker with the Russian flag earlier this weekend, and I think there is just this sense of this American might. You're seeing a very muscular Trump going into 2026, which and he's also said, of course, he's going to be expanding, funding to the U.S. military even more, and I think it fits into this sense of he's been talking about the Monroe Doctrine, he calls it the Donroe Doctrine, but you're also hearing something, might is right. It's a phrase that you keep hearing in DC as well, which is the sense of, forget, all these talks about the beauty of democracy. Actually, what matters the most is military strength, is what Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, has been talking about this week too. And I think with the tankers, with the boost in funding, and with what we saw in Venezuela, there's a real statement of intent.
Indeed. Katy, thanks ever so much for joining us. That's the Sunday Times and Times Washington editor, Katy Balls.
To get back their money, we're devising a formula, but it won't be so much of a formula. It's going to be what they need. I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that. But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay? I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. And by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too, I have to tell you, and they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also, but we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way. So we'll take a few more, though. Let me ask you more importantly, do you have any questions from the biggest